My name is Helena Nat. I'm the Executive Director with the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for supporting Small Business Friday. It's a huge celebration, actually, for those who haven't been with us. This is your first Friday with us. We started this in May during it was Small Business Day and Small Business Week. The SBA during COVID had kind of postponed the day, and we thought it was not the time actually to postpone celebrating small business and providing information. So we kind of picked up the go on it, and we had a huge response to a complimentary day of webinars, networking resources. So we want to start immediately. And on this presentation, this is a very important presentation about COVID, about release statements for the employer and regarding the employee. I am very interested in knowing about this on behalf of the Chamber. So put your information in the chat right below. For those who are joining us, on the bottom of your screen, there's a chat, and I will give Yvenne the questions you have. She has a long presentation right now, so we're only going to have about 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. I am going to provide her all the information of who is attending, so she will reach out to you just to say hi, just a follow-up, and I will have her information also for you. It's being recorded, so it will be on Chamber TV. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Yvenne M King. She is I would say it's her firm from YMK Associates. And I have to say, she attended and graduated George Washington University, where I attended, and majored in international relations. So right now, I'm going to turn it over, and here you go. Very important, very interesting information. Put your information in the chat, everyone, and I'm turning it over right now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Helena. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us today. First of all, thank you, Helena, and the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce for giving me this opportunity to share some information with you. So just a housekeeping note before I get started, the disclaimer. Please keep in mind that the information and recommendations I present to you today is not meant to provide legal advice, and you should seek your own legal counsel to fully understand the actions that are most appropriate for your particular situation. If you have any questions or require further information regarding the topics in my webinar today, feel free to contact me at any time. Okay, so when the shutdown frenzy started in March, I was at the stores stocking up on pasta and canned goods, sent my husband on a wild goose chase for toilet paper. It drove him crazy. He went to 8 places empty-handed at the end of the night. And my son and his friends were thrilled that they didn't have to go to school. We were thinking they were going to be out for a week or two. And I was wondering, oh my gosh, can I get to my kickboxing class? And then reality set in as the shutdown continued. And I began worrying about my small business clients and wondering, how my local favorite restaurants were doing and so forth. So I started sending them out information on the PPP and EIDL, helping them explore and create new ways to bring in revenue. I was trying to stay on top of all the different legal and business issues, and the guidelines and executive orders that were coming out and so forth. And I'd email my clients like, hey, did you check your insurance coverage? Did you check your lease agreements? Make sure you've got a force majeure clause, etc. And then as things started reopening, I was witnessing firsthand, all the small things, all the safety measures that the owner of a restaurant or shop or hair salon now have to do. The articles then started coming out about COVID-19 related lawsuits and complaints. And this made me wonder, oh my gosh, in addition to spending all this time and money trying to make their place safe for their employees and customers, what were business owners doing to protect their companies from lawsuits and complaints? So when I posed this question to some business owners, they're like, What? I have insurance. I got alarms and locks. Seriously? Who's going to sue me for for getting COVID in my store? That would be ridiculous. They can't prove it. Well, yes, they're right. In most cases, they cannot, but unfortunately, that's not a guarantee. It's not always. And then there are tons and tons of complaints coming up every day in every state. So it just depends on what safety measures the company has set up, and it depends on how business owner can prove, how that claim is ridiculous and baseless. So for businesses that have reopened or those that have remained open during the entire shutdown, there's 3 areas of concern that have been top of mind for me. 1, people suing businesses for contracting COVID-19 while on the company premises. These can be employees, they can be customers, or anyone else who happens to be there. 2, people filing complaints with the state agencies about businesses who are violating reopening guidelines. And then 3, media publishing stories, the public posting stories about restaurants or shops failing to enforce safety measures and therefore creating dangerous environments for customers. Last month, it was reported that Governor Cuomo received over 25,000 complaints of business and organizations violating the New York reopening guidelines. The bottom line is that once a lawsuit or complaint is filed against the company, the business owner has to respond. And so no matter how ridiculous or baseless a claim is, you as the business owner have to spend time and money to respond to a claim and to defend your company. It's terrible. And just as damaging is the negative publicity that can be created. The media publishing stories about reopening violators, the customers using social media to shame COVID-19 rule breakers. It's gone a little bit out of control, but it's there. Now, just hot off the press, last night, some new regulations. So if you own a bar or restaurant, or some of your friends do, let them know. New York City, Governor Cuomo is continuing his initiative, 3 strikes and you're closed. That means any establishment that receives 3 violations will be shut down. And then egregious violations can result in the loss of your liquor license or even closure before the 3rd strike. And then here's some shaming. They're going to post, if you are under a disciplinary charge, they're going to post you on the State Liquor Authority website with your name and location posted publicly and updated on a weekly basis. The second regulation is statewide. All bars and restaurants in New York, they can only serve alcohol to customers who are dining, who are ordering food from you. They have to maintain 6-foot social distancing, or at least put up physical barriers when you don't have 6 feet in between your tables. So, and then they're putting up a link saying, hey, customers, the public, if you see any violations, snap some pictures, send it over here to the State Liquor Authority. So in summary, all business owners need to protect themselves from COVID-19 related legal liability. There's no guarantee that any company would be completely protected from these claims or public shaming, but the goal really is to minimize or limit your COVID-19 legal and business risks. So today, the ways that you as a business owner can protect your company and minimize these risks of someone filing a lawsuit against you or a complaint or shaming you on the internet, these are the 4 things I want to cover. Top 10 mandates in the New York guidance. Then we'll talk about CYA documentation and why you should care. Then I'll cover what should go into an employee consent form and why it's important to have. And then the last thing is customer consent and waiver forms. So just a couple of comments before we dive in. Although my presentation today mainly helps brick and mortar businesses, there are a number of best practices that can be beneficial for all types of businesses. So stay tuned. And then the second point is for any companies outside of New York. My first topic about the New York guidance on reopening may not specifically apply to you, but stay tuned because there are some good takeaways that you can adopt for your business anyway.
Hold on, Yvenne. I have a question. Someone said they can't see the slides. Can someone in the chat, for those in the chat, tell me if everyone can see the slides or no? I know that Susan can. I just want to see. Yes. Okay. So I just want to make sure it's not on our end. Okay. So Susan, there must be, not to single you out, but Susan, it might be on your end. So take a look. Okay. Go ahead.
Great.
Sorry about that. I'm just watching the chat.
No problem. So
Are you, wait. One other thing. Are you advancing the slides or you're just keeping this one because they want to know if you're advancing the slides?
I am. The slide I have now is the title is New York Guidance on Reopening.
Yeah, it's not going through.
Well, it says here screen sharing is paused for some reason.
Hold on for technical, sorry about that. I am screen stop. You have hold on it.
Do I need to stop?
I don't know. You have the control of it now.
Okay, I just stopped the share. So you want to share it back to me?
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna make host. Okay, and then go into share your screen. Sorry about this, people. It's Zoom stuff. There we go.
Okay, so does everyone see?
There we go. It went to the, yep, it's working now.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
Great. So now it's hot off the press. I'm going to go to agenda. So here are the 4 topics we're going to cover. And then here's the first page of the first topic, New York Guidance on Reopening. So there are 10 mandates that I think are really, really important. There's a lot of information on the New York Forward website. It's really awesome the way they set it up. I've been going through a lot of different states and New York's is very well organized. It's a little bit overwhelming. Even for me, I read documents for a living, like 600-page contracts, but it's overwhelming. But just take little by little, step by step, and make sure you look at all 3 tabs, the summary, the interim guidance, and the business template. It's really helpful and nice the way they've laid it out. So number 1, business affirmation. This is a requirement. And the first time I went through it, I missed it. I didn't even see it. It's actually in the second document, the interim guidance. You scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see the business affirmation at the end. You have to complete and submit the business affirmation. It is required. Number 2, safety plan. New York requires you to set up a safety plan. Use their business safety plan template. It's nicely laid out and it'll help you incorporate all the details from the other 2 documents, the summary guidance, guidelines, and the interim guidance. If you need details, go back to the interim guidance. And once you've created it, make sure you keep it updated. And then New York says you have to post it on site, like your business premises. You have to put it in a conspicuous place. I'm guessing that might be something like tacking it up on a bulletin board, something like that. Number 3, PPEs. Business owners are required to provide these to their employees and their essential visitors. New York says you cannot open if you do not supply the PPEs. Okay. 4, training. They want to make sure that you train your staff on the use of PPEs. Next is health screenings. It's required for businesses to conduct health screenings every day. Every time that an employee goes to work, you have to go through the health screening. Now, some of my clients ask me, you know, what if they go on lunch breaks? I've screened them in the morning when they checked in. It's like, I highly recommend that every time your employee or independent contractor leaves the premises and they come back, make sure you screen them. You just never know where they've been during that time they've been away from your place of business. So it's best to be complete and consistent. Okay. Make sure your questionnaire is up to date with the CDC. So the health screening questionnaire is, temperature check, and then all the symptoms. Have you experienced headaches? Have you lost your sense of smell or taste, and so forth? Okay, just periodically check the CDC and make sure that they haven't changed the symptoms list. Okay. Next thing that's required is the log of health screenings. So you have a log, you have to make sure whoever conducts them that you write down, Jane Doe conducted the health screenings today, who was screened, and then you check either the person's screen passed or didn't pass, okay? One thing to remember, New York, this is a little unusual, but New York prohibits keeping health screening results. You cannot keep the results of anyone's health screenings. So that means, like, if John Smith had a temperature of 100.1, you can't put that in your records. It's not allowed. You can only say the person either passed or didn't pass your health screening. So the next point is make sure that you have, I'm sorry, I'm missing a, wait, okay. I think I have, okay. Another point about health screenings is to make sure you have an exposure control plan. So if someone is suspected or did test positive for COVID-19, there's a whole series of steps that you have to go through. Make sure you write that down, and that's your exposure control plan. Okay. Other things you want to do is make sure that if there are any other laws and regulations that apply to your particular industry, make sure that you're following them. I'm sorry, I'm having a little problem with my I don't know what's happening here. I apologize. Okay. All right. The next thing is site safety monitor. NERC requires that you designate a person who's going to stay updated on changes to regulations and laws that apply to you. Governor Cuomo's site has a place where you can be put on their email list. And so you'll get email alerts like the one I got last night about the new regs that just came out. It's really important to have a site safety monitor person. And once they get information about updates, then make sure you revise your safety plan and all your related documents, and then notify your staff and customers of those changes. Okay. Now, the next thing is that I noticed are complaints. As I previously mentioned, customers are using social media to shame businesses. Well, I found out that on the New York Forward website, there's a place where it says in big letters, complaints. So anybody can go there and file a complaint against a business. And then I found out that it shows up everywhere. So every county that has their own website about, here are the steps on, trying to follow the reopening guidelines, there's a section where they go, and if you have a complaint against the business, go here and we will take your information. So be very wary that this is a difficult time. There's a lot of people are very sensitive, and so they're going to be filing complaints if they come across anything that bothers them. So now this leads me to the top 3 best practices I'd like to share with you. I'd really like for business owners to seriously consider adopting. The first one is CYA documentation. Create a file. Others may call it keeping a paper trail or setting up your legal records. Whatever you want to call it, the important thing is to remember to keep written records. Document, document, document. As a business owner, especially during the pandemic, it's really important for you to keep business records, keep written records to show how you're complying with the New York guidelines and all the other laws and regulations that may apply to your business. It's important to show how you're making efforts to create and maintain a safe workplace for your employees and a safe place of business for your customers. Okay, so the purpose of this CYA documentation file is to gather all those written records into one place so that if anyone has a complaint against you, you've got all the proof there. So here are some examples of what I would recommend goes into your CYA documentation file. First, the New York guidelines require businesses to create a written safety plan. So that will be part of your file here. So from that plan, you can also create COVID-19 policies and procedures for your staff, and then also COVID-19 rules for your customers. Those two documents will then become part of your CYA documentation file. The New York guidelines also require you to keep logs of health screenings and contact tracing information. Those written records are also part of your CYA documentation file. Another one is when you place signs on tables, up on walls and doors, like that stop sign at your entrance where you remind people, don't come in unless you've got a face mask, don't come in if you're feeling sick. And then when you put down floor decals about social distancing, or you're rearranging your space to accommodate social distancing, or taking out the lobby or reception area, all of those are evidence of what you're doing to make your place safe. Take photographs of them and then put those pictures in your CYA documentation file. The New York guidelines also, as we talked about, require you to keep an exposure control plan. So if your employee is not passing the health screening, then you've got a whole series of procedures that you need to go through. So that those written policies and procedures for when that happens, that should be put in your CYA documentation file as well. And then anytime, other types of writings to include are written notes of occurrences. For example, if a customer complained about a staff member not sanitizing, then email a description to yourself about the details of what happened, how it was addressed, how it was resolved, was there any follow-up, so forth. I know it's kind of a pain, but during the pandemic, it's just important to document everything. So take the 5 minutes, shoot yourself an email describing everything, and then file it into your file, your documentation file. Okay. So now we move on to consent and waiver forms. So these forms are ones I've been recommending most businesses to use during the pandemic. There are consent forms for employees and independent contractors, and then consent and waiver forms for customers, mainly for businesses that involve close physical contact, such as hair and nail salons, spas, barbershops, things like that. The benefit of using these forms is to create a paper trail. And then these consent forms and waiver forms become another part of your CYA documentation file. So let's start with employee consent forms. Here are the things that need to go into an employee consent form. Number one is you want to set the stage and in the document to talk about COVID-19 and the risks and consequences. So the employee is reading that and it's like, yes, I understand what's going on. I agree, I acknowledge. Okay. Number two is the consent form is going to require the employee to agree to follow company rules, policies, and procedures. The next thing is you want the employee to agree in writing that they'll participate in mitigation measures. And that mainly means that your employee is going to agree to health screenings every time they come to work. Okay. And lastly, another important area is the employee agreeing to cooperate with all the requirements in your exposure control plan. So if the employee gets sick, becomes infected with COVID-19, then they're going to agree in this consent form that they're going to contact you, they're going to keep you updated on their condition, they're going to stay away from work for a certain period of time, and cooperate with your contact tracing efforts and so forth. It's just really nice to have all this in writing. So what you accomplish if you get your employees to sign a consent form that has these 4 main areas is, number one, you establish a paper trail of how you informed your employees of the rules that they're required to follow. You've also shown that your employees are going to agree that they're going to cooperate and participate in all your policies and procedures so that all of you together can successfully minimize the risks of exposure to COVID-19. Also, an employee who wants to file a complaint against you, whether it be about unsafe conditions in your workplace or something else related, this consent form that they've signed will be an important part of your CYA documentation file, showing how you complied with the required safety guidelines. So let's move on to customer consent and waiver forms. So here are the areas that should go into a consent and waiver form for customers. There's actually 2 parts. I'm going to start with the first part, which is the consent, and then we'll talk about the waiver. They all come in one document, but they cover 2 distinct areas. So the customer is going to consent, number one, just like the employee consent form, to the COVID-19 situation. They're also going to consent to following the company rules when they're in your shop. And they're going to participate in mitigation measures by agreeing to health screenings. Okay, so a word about health screenings with customers. New York, depending on the industry, so if you go into an industry and you're a hair salon, it will have in your interim guidance that you cannot mandate customers to agree to a health screening, but you can, their words are, you can strongly encourage. So with those companies, types of businesses where New York says you can strongly encourage your customers, I would strongly recommend that you strongly encourage your customers to agree to a health screening. It's in the interest to help everyone. It'll help your staff, it'll help your customers, other customers, etc. Okay, so in the consent form, they're going to agree to a health screening, and then you're going to list the CDC's COVID-19 symptoms, and ideally agree to a temperature check. That would be great. And then the last thing is providing information to include in your company's contact tracing log. So New York says that you cannot deny them services if the customer says, no, I don't want my information in your contact tracing information, your log, contact tracing log. You can strongly encourage them to agree to that, but if they say no, you can't say, sorry, you're not going to get a haircut today. Okay. So let's move on to waiver forms, the waiver part of the consent and waiver form. So waivers cover 3 main ideas. One is you're saying, hey, I, the customer, I'm voluntarily coming onto your premises to receive services. Number 2 is I'm going to assume the risks. I'm accepting the risk that if I come into your shop, even though you followed all the safety guidelines required by New York, I understand that there is still a risk of being exposed to COVID-19. And then the third part is if they sign this waiver, I, as the customer, promise not to sue the company for COVID-19 claims. So if they got sick from COVID-19, believe that they got it from being in your shop and they signed this waiver, they can't come back and say, hey, it's all your fault, please pay for my hospital bills now. Okay, so here's the tricky part about waivers. State and courts are generally quite sensitive to customers giving up their rights to sue a business owner. So whether a waiver is valid and enforceable depends on the state that your business is in. Okay. So in New York, waivers are valid and enforceable, but there are some exceptions. Okay. One of the exceptions, I'm sorry, I left it out in this slide. Before we get to the parking garage, one exception is gross negligence and willful misconduct. If you're grossly negligent in following the safety guidelines, they're going to say it doesn't matter that your customer signed a waiver or not. We're going to invalidate your waiver and we're going to find you liable. And then the other exceptions, this is from New York case law. And New York laws as well. If you own a parking garage, a parking lot, or repair service that is for 4 or more vehicles, I don't know why 4 or more, but that's their law, you cannot use waivers to avoid liability. And then if you own a pool, gymnasium, or place of amusement or recreation or similar establishment, you cannot use waivers either in New York. So if your business falls under one of the exceptions, you probably want to, and you still want to use a customer form of some sort, you probably should just stick with the customer consent form and leave out the waiver part. Okay, the consent form is still good because they're agreeing to certain things like following your rules and agreeing to health screening and so forth. And then the last point about that is if you do decide to do that, but you want to double check and make sure that you've got everything buttoned up, find a lawyer to advise you on that. Now, the last thing about the words similar establishment, it's a little unclear, what businesses fall under that similar establishment. Like, are we talking about like an indoor shooting range or something else like that? We don't know. So if your business might fall under the similar establishment, then you probably want to contact an attorney and clarify that. Okay. So whether you have waivers or consents for your customers, basically, here's a hypothetical. The customer comes in for a haircut. A week later, they contact you and she says, I got sick and it's because I was in your place. I self-quarantined for 2 weeks before I came to you and I haven't seen anyone before or after. It's your fault. Please pay my hospital bills. Well, if you had that customer sign a consent and waiver form when she came into your hair salon on the day of her appointment, then that could be a valid defense against the customer if she decides to file a lawsuit against you. You may end up not having to go to court. You may end up possibly settling out of court if the other side's attorney sees the signed consent and waiver form. But please note that's a pretty simplified hypothetical. So just know in real life, if something like that happened, there might be other factors that will make it not such an open and shut case. But generally, if you're following the state guidelines and you're doing everything proper and properly having consent and waivers signed by your customers, then it will help you minimize your liability. Okay, so let's talk about, in summary, the benefits. We've talked a little bit about the benefits. I want to touch on businesses that provide services involving close physical contact. in my opinion, those like hair salons, nail salons, barbershops, spas, those are the ones that I feel like really should ask the customers to sign consent and waiver forms. It's just a way to minimize your company's liability from COVID-19 lawsuits and complaints. It's just, when you're in close physical contact, that can obviously, it can increase the risks of being exposed to COVID-19. And then that means the higher risk of exposure could very well increase the chances of customers filing claims against you. Okay. But keep in mind that even when you do have these forms signed and so forth, you're not automatically and completely shielded from liability. So you have to remember what we talked about before is gross negligence, intentional misconduct. If those are in play, then New York courts will not enforce the consent and waiver. Okay. But basically, regardless of these hurdles that we have to overcome, having these forms can still help deter some people from filing baseless claims against your business, establish a paper trail of how you informed your customers about the risks involved and the rules that they're required to follow, and show your customers how their cooperation is so important to your company's efforts in creating a safe place of business for everyone. And then obviously, all of these signed consent and waiver forms should become a part of your CYA documentation file. So in summary, let's take action. Go through the top 10 requirements from the New York guidance and make sure you've completed them, make sure you're in compliance with them. Number 2 is create a CYA documentation file to keep a record of all your safety protocols that you've established and implemented, all your written plans, your rules, policies, and procedures, photographs of everything you set up physically in your environment, and written documents, little emails of any COVID-19 incidents. Number 3 is create an employee COVID-19 consent form. Have all your employees and independent contractors sign off on them. And then lastly, create a customer COVID-19 consent and waiver form. And then depending on the type of business you're in, it may be just the consent form, or it may be both the consent and waiver form. So I have special offers, but before we get to that, do we have any questions? I can't hear you, Helena.
No questions right now. I'm looking at the chat.
Okay, great.
I thought it was really, it was very informative about the, I didn't know that about the parking lots, the number, the car, the gymnasiums. I didn't know that they cannot do release statements. That was very interesting. That's something I learned. So what I think you went over really well, that you have to document everything.
Yes.
I did have a question. I don't know if anyone else, while they're thinking of it. So if someone goes to lunch, oh, no. You said to retake their temperature. The question I had for you, which I found informative. So if someone comes in and they have 101 fever, we can't document their name?
It has to go, well, that would be a different case, but you can't put it in. I know that for privacy reasons.
You have to have a separate sheet for each employee, I was told.
Yes.
But yes. I can't record. So if I have a separate sheet, I'm not doing, I don't have a general sign-in sheet. I have a sheet for everyone. If that person, let's say my associate Jane Doe comes in and she has 101, she has her separate sheet. I can record it in as 101. I just can't put it on a sheet with other employees' names, correct? Is that what that was it?
Well, that's one part of it. They did say in the New York guidelines that you cannot record the results, but I think that if you're actually, if one of your employees is actually experiencing COVID-19 symptoms, then it would make sense to have a separate file with just that employee and making notes like, okay, they have a temperature, they're now going to go, go home because they can't come into my place of business, they can't come into my shop, and then I'm going to ask that person to follow up with me. I'm going to encourage that person to go get tested, and so she'll call me back, and then I'm going to find out, okay, what's the next step. It seems like in that situation that if you keep it separate in that particular employee's file of every incident that's going on, that you should be able to. So it's a little unclear about that part, but I do know that, in the beginning, I thought if you had a full list of all the CDC symptoms and you just check it off for every single person, it's like, okay, no chills, no fever, no headaches, no this, no that. And then those are the results of the health screening. But I think generally they don't want you to keep that. I think they're worried about HIPAA violations, because the HIPAA is all for the medical industry. And then you're like, these are medical files because they're related to healthcare information, but we're not a healthcare provider. And so they're trying to keep that separate.
Got it. Okay. You guys, we have like 3 more minutes. Does anyone have any questions that you can put in the chat? If not, you know what? I know that Yvonne is going to reach out to you guys because I'm going to, she'll get a copy of the attendees. So this way she can, if you have something that you want to speak to her confidentially on, you have that opportunity. So in the meanwhile, I don't see any questions. It was a very informative, thank you so much. I thought it was very informative. I've learned a lot, and I've been listening to a lot of webinars on this because I think everyone always brings something new to this. And I think it's always, we all have to remember everything changes every single day when it comes to this information. So again, if you guys have any questions, Yvenne will be reaching out to you, and we so appreciate this powerful PowerPoint presentation. And everyone have a safe day, and just wear your mask. That's all we ask.
Yeah. Everyone,
and
happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Here's her information if you guys want to take a screenshot. And also, if you have any questions, you feel free to email me anytime. And thank you so much. And for those who are joining us at 12 o'clock for the SBA, they're commenting, Yvenne, on it was a great presentation in the chat.
Great. Actually, there is one question. Did we cover any medical information collected has to be kept in a separate file? Yeah, we covered that from the employee's personal file. Yeah, must be protected as health information. Yeah, that's because of the HIPAA rules. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, well, I have to end the meeting. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you. Everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you, Helena. Bye.
Take care. Let me get the chat.
Thank you so much, Helena.
Thank you so much. This was very, I love information like this. So awesome. This is great. I'll send you all the information, okay?
Okay, cool.
Okay, bye.
Bye.